Welcome to OurSport. I'm Larry. I'm your host. As always, John is doing the recording and editing and providing occasional commentary. This episode, we're going to do our draft grades. We're going to give draft grades to every team from this year's 2020 NFL Draft. And let me start with this. I think this draft is going to be, in a sense, because of coronavirus, impacted in terms of where the talent is distributed. This is an exceptionally deep draft, I thought. There were not at some positions necessarily, but overall, this is a kind of a talent-rich draft. And executives, people that judge talent, they prefer security. They prefer sure things. The physical evaluations, in terms of how big and fast somebody is, are one thing, but they're also medical evaluations. And because of uncertain medical evaluations, because teams were not able to get their hands on players and have their doctors inspect them, players with a lot of talent who are not going to have medical issues in the NFL are going to slip down this draft. And conversely, what happens is a lot of teams would take a safer pick in the first, second, or third round where there will be average players or busts or players that just literally weren't as talented. So essentially, the first round talent usually is grouped in the first round. The second round talent is grouped in the second round, etc. And this draft, it was a little all over the place, and it made it much more interesting, I thought. Now, let's start. We're going to go division by division. And we're going to start with the AFC North. And we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals, who had the first pick and took LSU quarterback Joe Burrow. Now, I can find flaws in Joe Burrow. They're minor, okay? I have to because when I look at the game, not really as a fan, or I try to look at it as a coach, I understand how coaches think. I don't have their level of schematic awareness, but I feel like I really have a grasp of how scouts look at the game, and that's how I try to look at a game like a scout. And I think I just kind of gravitate to that line of thinking, how scouts look at it. It's fascinating to me. So I can pick apart parts of Joe Burrow's game, but let's not be stupid. Joe Burrow's upside is tremendous. He had a great year. You're always looking for something that's wrong with him, but there's not much. And the Bengals had to take this guy at number 1 overall. Let's put it this way. I would take him number 1 overall. John and I are in a dynasty draft. We have the number 1 overall pick. We're going to take Joe Burrow, and there was not a debate about it. His awareness, his ability to navigate the pocket, his rare accuracy, his poise. He has so many things that are top level and translate to the NFL. The Bengals had to take him at 1. In the second round, take T. Higgins, receiver out of Clemson. Big receiver, receiver-rich draft. Now, what worried me about Higgins is that there are times that he would struggle against elite corners in college. Jeffrey Okudah gave him problems. He had problems in the championship game against LSU. He really had a couple years ago, the game against Alabama where they blew Alabama out. He had some struggles in that game as well. The score is misleading, and they had some breakaway plays due to injuries from Alabama players in the secondary. But, okay, you're not going to face Jeffrey Okudah all the time. But you're going to face NFL talent, which is better than anything you ever saw in the Atlantic Coast Conference. You're not going to see like the corners from Pitt in the NFL. That would worry me, but too big, too fast, still too productive to ignore. A good pick. Third round, Logan Wilson, linebacker out of Wyoming. John and I did a lot of work on him. We love this kid. 4-year starter, 10 career interceptions. Not nearly an athlete, some of these guys like Isaiah Simmons are, but really a good player. We like that pick. Akeem Davis-Gaither, undersized backer out of Appalachian State in the 4th pick. Good pick. Some picks later on to help the offensive line. We like the draft. I like it. I gave it a solid A- for the Bengals. The Cleveland Browns. All right, I've killed the Browns because I thought that their focus on analytics would skew this draft like they had in some of the others where they took Corey Coleman in the first round a few years ago. And remember him, John? What a bust he was. Holy cow.
He was actually the one who dropped the pass.
He dropped the pass that could have made them actually win a
15.
game. Right. He was really a bust, but I got to give them credit. They did well in this draft. Jedrick Wills, tackle out of Alabama in the first round. Doesn't have like the rare arm length of Andrew Thomas, the rare size of Mekhi Becton, the rare athleticism of Tristan Wirfs, but he's just a damn good player. He's just really an alpha dog, leader of that offense at Alabama, Tua said. Great pick here. Second round, Grant Delpit, I love where they got him. If you look at his tape from a year ago, he would have been a top 10 pick, and you're gambling on the fact that he was really hurt. When you have injuries at safety and you miss tackles, that really might skew the evaluation. That has to be one of the most important tacklers on your team in the last line of defense, and evaluators get nervous because of that. But you look at his tape the year before, this is maybe his potential. So I like that pick in the second round. Third round, Jordan Elliott, defensive tackle out of Missouri. Good pick here, comparable in that level to the Neville Gallimores of the world. SEC focus, if you notice. The Bengals have it again, SEC players, and now the Browns maybe have gravitated to it. Maybe their analytics tells them this, and this is not necessarily a bad formula for your analytics if they're telling you this, because that conference is producing the most NFL talent. Jacob Phillips, linebacker, LSU in the third round. I thought a bit of a reach. In the fourth round, Harrison Bryant, tight end from Florida Atlantic. Super productive, super athletic. Arms are a little short. You kind of worry about that. He's got to block the defensive players from getting to his quarterback when he has to block. But, man, this is a loaded tight end room now with Njoku and Austin Hooper. Clearly they prioritize this position. Overall, I like this draft a lot. And I'm going to have a lot of that in here where I think I've kind of skewed to the margins. I have a lot of drafts that I really like, maybe because there's so much talent in this draft, and a lot of drafts where I don't like at all. But this one, great draft. Just good players. I can't knock the Browns for what they did here. I'm going to give them an A. Pittsburgh Steelers. You have to figure in Minka Fitzpatrick as their first-round pick. They traded for him, and I do that in this grade. That's a great first-round pick. They played him at his natural position. They left him at one position. He made the Pro Bowl. They got more out of him than Miami ever did. So that was a good use of that asset. Now, as in terms of the actual drafting itself, I didn't care for it because I thought the Steelers picked everybody about a round earlier than they should have been picked. Chase Claypool is a big, fast wide receiver at Notre Dame, and he might actually end up moving at tight end, be like a Jordan Reed type of tight end, or he may stay at receiver, maybe a flex. It's kind of nebulous what they're going to do with him now. But, he didn't play to those measurables at Notre Dame. He would flash, but he wasn't consistent enough. In the third round, Alex Highsmith, edge rusher. In the fourth round, Kevin Dotson, the other guard out of Louisiana with Robert Hunt over there. And I just thought the Steelers did not get the players they should have when they could have. Every one of these guys should have gone around later. And I think that Claypool is not necessarily a reach. He's their most important asset in this draft class. I gave this one a C+. All right, the Baltimore Ravens. First round, took fast riser. Patrick Queen out of LSU in round one. Second round, great value pick. J.K. Dobbins. They're going to put him in a loaded backfield. You may not think that they don't need a running back, but when we did our mock draft, I had them taking a running back as early as round one. And then good value throughout. Devin Duvernay in round three. Receiver out of Texas, just really productive. A track star. Also out of round three, Justin Matabuke, defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. And when he went out of that lineup for A&M, their defense noticeably declined. He was an important asset. And then players later on, James Prochet, sixth-round receiver out of SMU. Where John and I are Michigan fans. I remember watching SMU Michigan a few years ago, a game that Michigan was supposed to blow the team out. And who is this receiver? This guy's killing us. We could not stop this guy. Well, if you watch him in all these AAC games against Memphis and that big game, this guy just makes plays. This guy is short but gets open. I think he has a real chance, even as a sixth-round player, to make this team. This is a really deep receiving class, and Ravens took advantage of it. I like this draft. It's a typical Ravens draft. You just got a lot of good value throughout, and I give this a solid A. The Houston Texans, and you can't discuss this without discussing two things. First of all, they don't have a first-round pick. They traded 2 first-round picks for Larry Tunsil, so in this grade, you have to assume that one of these first-round picks is half of Larry Tunsil. It's kind of a dope way to look at it, but what else are you going to do? And then they traded DeAndre Hopkins, and they got a second-round pick for him. On that, yeah, I'm against it generally, but if you read the latest Sports Illustrated issue, they had an article with him, and Sports Illustrated has always been bad about fawning over athletes. It's getting to the point of embarrassment now. But you can see why they traded him. He definitely has some diva, some locker room lawyer to him. Now, would I have traded him? No, because he's an all-pro. And part of your job as a coach is to work with these guys. But I guarantee you this, they would have gotten a first-round pick for him if they could have found it. And I don't think anybody's willing to give up a first-round pick for him. So that might tell you something about Hopkins himself. NFL players, evaluators know a lot more about these players than we do. So the fact they couldn't get a first-round pick for him tells you something about him. I still wouldn't have traded him. But overall in this draft, Ross Blacklock in the second round, good value. Jonathan Grenard in the third round as an edge rusher, good value. Charlie Heck, bit of a reach, but I liked him. Big, nasty offensive tackle out of North Carolina. I remember his dad playing in the NFL. John Reed, an undersized, feisty, mouthy corner out of Penn State. He's going to have to play nickel. And even Isaiah Coulter, who's got some prototype traits, and he's out of Rhode Island, and he played well against superior competition whenever he faced them. A limited amount of picks, but considering what they had, I kind of like this draft. I give it a solid B. The Indianapolis Colts. Again, you have to figure in their first-round pick is DeForest Buckner. They traded it for him with the 13th overall pick. And this team is changing what they are. They're trying to be bullies. They're trying to be bigger and more physical, and you could tell. Michael Pittman in the second round. A little early, I thought. I think John liked him more than I did. Is that right? Yeah, John. I still like him. Jonathan Taylor in the second round, who I love this pick. Julian Blackman, defensive back out of Utah in the third. I'm not as high on. Jacob Eason in the fourth. I could see why they did it, but he's got some character issues, not in terms of off the field, but like he partied his way out of Georgia and he doesn't take the game seriously enough. But you got a 6'6" guy with a hose of an arm, and the more this draft went on, the less I liked their picks. I did like Des Patman's 6th-round pick out of Washington State at receiver. I mean, that's another 6'4", 225 receiver. They're intentionally trying to get bigger all across, so you can see it. But, you get DeForest Buckner, a proven all-pro defensive tackle who's still young with your first overall pick. You don't have to wonder what he's going to be. You don't project what he's going to be. You see what he's going to be. Holy cow, it's a slam dunk win. I can't give this draft anything worse, despite the fact how I did not like how it tapered off down the end. But I can't give this draft anything worse than an A-. This is a great draft when you figure out what they got for the first round. Tennessee Titans. I see what they were doing. I just didn't care for this draft much. Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia, huge offensive tackle, 6'6", 350 to replace Jack Conklin. I like him. I don't like him as a first-round pick. I kind of thought he was about early third. I thought he was the lesser of the offensive tackles in Georgia. Christian Fulton in the second round. I think, again, John likes him better than I do.
Yeah, I really like, especially they got him late second round, too.
I know. I kind of wonder if they're better players on the board. I just can't get the feeling that he's going to struggle.
Too good there.
He's kind of, we disagree on that. Darrington Evans, an explosive back out of Appalachian State in the third round. And then an intriguing pick to me, very, very unlikely chance that he ever makes an NFL roster, but I'm fascinated by him. And John is Cole Mcdonald, quarterback in Hawaii in the 7th round. And this is one of the funnest quarterbacks you can watch in college because he's going to throw a touchdown and you don't know for what team. He's got a live NFL arm. He is fearless. He will throw 2 interceptions and keep throwing the ball down the field. And he does have NFL skills. This guy is a complete wild card. I hope to God he makes the NFL so I can see him play because he's a Mountain West Conference version of Jameis Winston. He's exciting no matter which team he's making plays for. Overall, I didn't care for this draft. One of the weak ones, I thought. A lot of reaches, not enough value. I give this one, despite Cole Mcdonald, a C-. The Jaguars, they love drafting Florida players. Juwan Taylor, Fred Taylor, Tavian Bryan, Dante Fowler. And in the first round here, they take C.J. Henderson, corner out of Florida. Clearly the second best corner on the board. Fills a big need. K'Lavon Chasen, pass rusher. How do you pronounce it, John?
I think it's K'Lavon.
K'Lavon, thank you. Out of LSU in the first round. A good pick there. Thought to have been the pick at Dallas if C.D. Lamb had not fallen to them. And the second round, big Laviska Shenault. Looks like almost a fullback, breaking tackles left and right. Receiver out of Colorado. Played through a core muscle injury. And some more good value. Colin Johnson, receiver out of Texas in the 5th round. Big kid, 6'6", 225. Some reaches. I didn't like the defensive tackle they took out of Ohio State in the 3rd round. I didn't like Shaq Quarterman, the linebacker they took in the 4th round. 4-year starter at Miami. I just don't think he's a good NFL player. He's a very solid player just in the ACC. Overall, it's a solid draft. I like the early picks. I thought it descended after that. I gave it a solid B. And now we come to the AFC East and my favorite draft class in this entire draft, which is the New York Jets. Mekhi Becton, offensive tackle out of Louisville in the first round, 6'7", 364. Can play left tackle. Has the athleticism to play left tackle at this size. If he doesn't, he certainly does at right tackle. It's up to him whether he's a bust or not. Just a great pick, fills a huge need, and did not reach. Need meets value. Second round pick, Denzel Mims, the player the Eagles wanted. A lot of fans were screaming for him. And 6'3", over 200 pounds, can run, productive. He had one bad game against Oklahoma where we shut out in the Big 12 championship game. Other than that, you've got 3 years of production. A great pick there. Third round pick, Ashton Davis. I watch a lot of this Cal team in some of those late night Pac-12 games. I like the whole secondary. This guy was the best guy in the whole secondary. Tall, athletic, rangy safety, a ball hawk. And as it went down, some of the picks, I like Jabari Zaninga in the third round, didn't love it. LaMichael Pirine in the fourth round, didn't love it. It was fine. But then James Morgan, the quarterback out of FIU, I thought clearly the fifth best quarterback in this class. Big guy, has an NFL skill set. Not some kind of a project like Jake Fromm, whose ceiling is maybe like a backup. Could be a legitimate starter. And you go all the way down. Cameron Clark, value pick in the fourth round, again to help the offensive line. Brendan Mann, the punter, in the sixth round. If you watch A&M games, this guy's booming punts. I believe he won a Ray Guy Award. I could be wrong about that. Bryce Hall, corner in the fifth round. This guy was a first-round talent. Injuries, but size and production. A lot of interception, a lot of pass defenses. In the fifth round, a guy with first-round skills. The medical is obviously a big question. Overall, value for almost every pick. I love what the Jets did. They're the only team in our draft grades that got an A+. Now we come to one of the most scrutinized teams in this draft. Teams are looking ahead. People were looking ahead of this draft for about a year, the Miami Dolphins. They took Tua Tagovailoa in the first round and the fifth overall pick. Had to do it. And I like the way the Dolphins kind of played this before the draft. It's like, oh, we're trying to trade up to 3 for an offensive tackle. We're trying to trade 3 and 5 together to get Joe Burrow. All the focus is to make people think they didn't want Tua, which I think they wanted Tua the whole time. Like that pick. In the first round, again, Austin Jackson. They're loaded with first-round picks. Offensive tackle at USC. Young, athletic, has some warts. Maybe a bit of a reach. They had to take him here. They really didn't have a choice. He was the best tackle left on the board. You have to have some assets to protect what's already an injury-prone quarterback going into the league. And after that, I don't really like much of this draft. In the first round, Noah Igbenogany.
Really? You're going to get that right, but not Calebon?
Right. So I studied the pronunciation on that one. A corner out of Auburn, track guy. I thought his play was spotty. His tackle was pretty good for a track guy, but I thought it was a real kind of reach. His parents were, I think, 2 Nigerian track athletes who were both played in the Olympics. That's nice. You're not drafting his parents. He doesn't run a 4.3. You know, he runs like a 4.45. He's a good player, maybe in the third round. Raekwon Davis, big, athletic, second-round pick out of Alabama. Huge size. Didn't do anything. Had a great sophomore year, and by his own admission, didn't do hardly anything in his junior year of football. What are you paying him now? You paying him? You think he's going to do something now? And it's going to take a lot. It's be a coach's headache to motivate this guy. The guy admits he's a follower. And as you went down this draft, I just didn't like a lot of these picks. Robert Hunt was not a bad pick on the offensive line, and they have a lot of guys here who they like for their scheme. They tend to build from the back forward like a lot of the Patriots assistants do. I just thought it was a lot of reaches, considering that this team had so much hype going into the draft. And they could have nailed this draft. They had so many picks, and this was a draft that was rich with talent. I do like the Tua pick. Personally, he's my favorite quarterback. John likes Burrow more. But there is the injury history, and overall, considering the entirety of their draft, I'm not very impressed by it. I give it a C-. The New England Patriots. I thought this started out well. I love the Kyle Duggar pick. You don't find a lot of safeties with these physical traits. And he's going to be he's productive from a lower level, Lenore Ryan. And Belichick, is going to coach him up. And then again in the second round, a guy John and I are familiar with, Josh Uche, pass rusher out of Michigan. A bit undersized, but super long arms. After that, I thought you had a lot of reaches. Anthony Jennings in the third round, size, but stiffness, a little slow. Edge rusher from Alabama I'm talking about, not really that productive. Devin Asiasi, third-round pick from UCLA, former Michigan player, sluggish, not really productive. I don't understand a lot of these picks. Bill Belichick is arguably the greatest coach of all time, maybe not arguably. Let's not confuse that with evaluating, because I'm not sure the man's the best general manager of all time. It's the man who traded Chandler Jones. This is the guy who picked Gerard Mayo with the 9th overall pick. Gerard Mayo was a good player, but nobody criticized that pick. Well, nobody's talking about Gerard Mayo on the 9th pick till the Patriots picked him. Then they're like, oh, great pick. Is it? Was he worth the 9th overall pick in that draft? So they did. Of course, they're going to find some good players, and of course, Belichick knows more about football than probably any man alive, except maybe Nick Saban. You can't deny that. I'm not sure his ability as a general manager is equal to his ability as a coach. I do like the first couple of picks. Overall, I give it a C-. The Buffalo Bills. You have to take into account that Stephon Diggs is basically their first-round pick. That is going to get factored into our grade. And A.J. Epineza, Iowa defensive lineman in the second round. Now, Epineza's got maybe like a nebulous skill set. What is he? Is he a defensive end? Is he a tackle? He's not a great combine tester. What he is he's just a smart, productive football player that just makes plays. That's all he is. And he does have some scheme versatility for a smart defensive mind, which Sean McDermott is. I trust Sean McDermott to coach this kid. In the third round, Zach Moss, running back out of Utah. And John and I watched a lot of him play. And man, the guy is like one of my favorite college players. He is just, I remember he had a game against USC, and USC had all the 5-star athletes, and he just goes out and he just bullies the USC defense. Guys are bouncing off of him. He's challenging linebackers to meet his physicality, and they were failing. And they just ran the ball down USC's throat. And he's a very steady, productive, consistent runner. But I just don't see NFL traits. I see a guy who's just big enough and physical enough for the Pac-12, but doesn't quite translate as much. I like the kid. I like his mindset. I'm not sure he's a good enough pick here. In the fourth round, Gabe Davis, receiver out of UCF, not a bad pick. In the sixth round, Isaiah Hodgins, a Pac-12 receiver out of Oregon State, super productive, big prototype size, NFL offense. Jonathan Smith fed him the ball at Oregon State. I like that pick. And Jake Fromm, quarterback from Georgia, fifth round. Limited NFL skill set, but for what they're going to ask him to do, which is, hey, if our quarterback gets hurt for 3 games, go in there, be a caretaker, just manage the game. He is very smart. He's well-liked in the locker room. He's got a weak arm. It's going to be an issue in Buffalo and if they has to play in like December. But for that purpose, I like him. I think it's a very solid pick. I trust Sean McDermott. I like this coaching staff. They seem to get the best out of their players. They really know what they're doing. And I give it a solid B. Let's start with the AFC West and the Las Vegas Raiders, which is weird to say, and it's going to be weird to say for a while. In the first round, Henry Ruggs, receiver out of Alabama. The first receiver taken, people thought Jerry Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb would be taken first. I don't disagree with the pick. I love Ruggs. I thought he was great. I thought he was a better receiver than Jeudy. I think you disagree with me? You like Jeudy better?
Yeah, I like Jeudy better.
Yeah, I love Ruggs. He's got hands. A lot of these guys that are blazers, I mean, he's a real blazer, 4.27 speed and plays to it. You know, they're kind of prima donnas. They don't want to get hit. They don't have great hands. He's got all of that. So I love that pick. And then really the biggest reach of the draft, at least until day 2, Damon Arnett, first-round pick, corner out of Ohio State. I don't see it. I don't know what this is about. And as you went on, really a lot of up-and-down picks. Lynn Bowden, third round. He was a receiver at Kentucky, and their quarterbacks were just basically out for the year, and they just put him in as a Wildcat quarterback, and they just started running football. He had like 1,200 yards rushing. That's basically became a 19-13 offense. And the talk is that they're going to move him to running back. Bryant Edwards, receiver out of South Carolina in the third round. I don't understand that pick. And Amik Robertson, I love this pick. I told John, look this kid, check this guy out. He's a fourth-round player out of Louisiana Tech. Whoever's coaching their secondary is doing a good job. They've had 2 guys drafted out of it this year. And the guy's just like 5'8", 187. All he does is make plays. The guy makes plays on the ball. When he gets his hands on the ball, he catches it, gets interceptions, makes tackles for loss. And he's just feisty and physical. He's 5'8", and he plays like he's 6'3". The guy doesn't know how small he is. And he just plays with a chip on his shoulder. And some guys do that and can't play. The guy can play. I love that pick in the fourth round. But this draft for them was too spotty, too up and down, too inconsistent. You had 2 first-round picks. You're going to do things like trade Khalil Mack. You're going to get guys like Damon Arnett.
With Kenneth Murray still on the board.
With Kenneth Murray still on the board, I just don't understand it at all. And so I give them a. You can only fault the team so much when they draft Henry Ruggs, but I give them a C-. The defending world champs, the Kansas City Chiefs, with the first pick in the draft, their first round pick, they take Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, running back from LSU. Now Hilaire is short and stocky. He's got a great skill set. He's got a 3-down skill set. He catches the ball fantastically. He lines up at LSU. He lined up in a slot. He lined up wide, and Coach Andy Reid compared him to Brian Westbrook, which is a really good comparison. You look back at how Westbrook played with the Eagles, how productive he was in a run and pass game. That is a good comp. After that, I really didn't like much of this draft. Willie Gay, second-round linebacker at Mississippi State. I thought a major reach, has some size and speed, but he has off-field concerns. I think those are a little bit overblown. Maybe kind of a bit of a academic scandal right there, but I mean, they're in the SEC. They're not going to class. In the third round, Lucas Niang, the TCU offensive tackle, I thought it was a reach, but if you look at that Super Bowl, their left tackle, the Chiefs, Eric Fisher, he was getting killed by Nick Bosa. I mean, killed every play. And I believe this because the Chiefs were losing that Super Bowl in the fourth quarter until Shanahan helped them. They would have lost that Super Bowl if the refs called a holding when you're supposed to call a holding. He was getting beat by Nick Bosa that bad. Now, Nick Bosa is a special player. Not a lot of guys like that in the league. And I understand why you want to replace Eric Fisher, who's getting older and clearly was not worth the number 1 overall pick. But I was just not impressed with this draft. Even Clyde Edwards-Hilaire, I thought they might have been there a little later, not in the second round when they picked. Overall, underwhelming. I give this draft a D. The Los Angeles Chargers, now Los Angeles. Justin Herbert, quarterback at Oregon. They had to take him. 6th pick of the first round. A little rich. I like him. It's not a bad pick. Kenneth Murray, also in the first round of Oklahoma. Right about where they should have taken him. Not bad. I don't like Joshua Kelly, the running back at UCLA they took in the 4th round. They really had this kind of gap between their 1st and then 4th round picks. But in the 5th round, they stole a kid named Joe Reed out of Virginia. Reed was a good receiver at Virginia, but he was one of the elite kick returners in the country, just taking it to the house left and right on punt and kick returns. Also pretty good as a receiver. Pretty much their MVP if you take away their quarterback on that team. Overall, a solid draft, a little low on picks. Took players right where they're supposed to, bit of a reach. I give it a B-. Denver Broncos. Well, this is clear what is going on when you look at the history of the Broncos. When John Elway went to all those Super Bowls, they did not get help around him on offense. He had the 3 amigos at receivers. Those guys were just clearly made by Elway. They were not superstar receivers. And he's putting himself in Drew Lock's situation. He was there. He was a Broncos quarterback, and he knows. And so, weapons. Let's get him weapons. This kid has a big arm. And let's get weapons that emphasize that can threaten the field that way. So, first round, Jerry Jeudy, a receiver with speed, not just speed. The guy's a route technician, an abject steal at the 15th pick. Second round, what do? A blazer, KJ Hamler with his 4.3 speed in the second round. We're talking about, they already have Cortland Sutton, that receiver who emerged last year. They spent a first-round pick on Noah Fant, who can fly for tight end. And then this year, they got Albert O. I'm not going to pronounce his name. Can you do it? The tight end out of Missouri?
What's his name?
Albert O. Okanagbo.
Okanagani?
Yeah, he's good. He's really good. Had some medical questions. Still a great pick for that point. And now what do you have? You have all these weapons around your quarterback, and they complement his skill set. Okay? So you have guys that can fly under that deep ball and take pressure off the run game, take pressure off the quarterback. Their offensive line is still a work in progress, but blitz them at your own risk. If you blitz this team, they can go over the top on you. If you blitz this team and you miss that one tackle on KJ Hamler or Jerry Jeudy or maybe even Cortland Sutton, who's got that rare size, this will back up the defense in terms of pressure. This will back up the defense in terms of the run game. So overall, I like everything they did in this draft. McTelvin Agim in the 3rd round, pass rusher out of Arkansas. I don't like the Michael Ojemudia pick, the corner out of Iowa, as much as other people, but I trust Vince Fangio, Big Fangio, who's one of the best defensive coaches in football, really one of the most underrated coaches in football, to know what he's looking at, and I love this draft for what it does. I give them an A.
Albert Ogunbanagani.
Ogunbanagani.
Saying that one 5 times fast.
Okay, now we go on to NFC. We're going to start with the NFC East and the Philadelphia Eagles. the strangest draft by far. Cowboys fan John is laughing his ass off. Jalen Reagor, a reach in the first round. They talked about him running a 4.22 in his private pro day, virtual pro day, but the guy has some inconsistency. The guy has some effort questions. The questions about his catching, I don't buy into that. He had a litany of just quarterback play that was up and down, guys going in and out of the lineup, so I do think he could catch. And then Jalen Hurts in the second round, the quarterback from Oklahoma, a completely baffling pick. It gets worse when they try to explain it, and the Eagles fans are not buying it. They're all over their websites talking about how we're not buying whatever you're selling us. Trying to explain what they perceive as their GM's ineptitude. Third round pick, Davian Taylor out of Colorado, a linebacker. I also thought it was a reach. Now, in the third day, to be fair, I do think they got some value picks. Quez Watkins is a receiver that can run. They clearly were trying to get faster. They had a couple of the Auburn offensive line picks that I like. Casey Toolhill, defensive end. He's a linebacker at Stanford. He's going to transition to defensive end. Had some good tools for that. But that was a seventh round pick. And you want your best picks to be in the early part of the draft and day one, not day three. And man, they bombed day two. So it's hard to give this team anything more than a D- overall.
What?
This was a
outrage. I claim outrage.
What?
This is my favorite draft. I give it an A++.
Okay, Cowboys homer over here.
I like to put it in our draft.
So and then the worst part is that if you're an Eagles fan, they hate the Cowboys, but you don't hate the Eagles.
No.
Why?
Well, see, we're on the NFC East roller coaster.
Yeah.
It has 3 Super Bowls to ride.
Oh God.
It's like we're here.
They didn't
the
want to
Redskins and the Giants and us and the Eagles are off camera.
They won a Super Bowl.
One.
More recently than your team.
One.
Can't get out of
the
here.
one.
Conversely, when it comes to the Cowboys,
Woo!
this was one of the this was one of the better drafts there, and we're not the only one saying that. I've got a Cowboys homer here, but man, you look, this is a very well-regarded draft. They needed other players, but when CeeDee Lamb fell to them at round one, just take the best player available. This was, for the most part, best player available or need meeting clear value. Trevon Diggs in the second round, they stole this kid, this corner out of Alabama. He has longer arms than Jeffrey Okudah. He has longer arms than Curtis Weaver and Bradley Nye, pass rushers. He has longer arms than K'Lavon Chaisson. K'Lavon Chaisson.
But Igbenogany you get.
Right. So, and then all the way down, the draft just kept following them. They just took the best player on their board. Where need met value. Neville Gallimore, good pick in the third round. I didn't like the fourth round pick, the corner out of Tulsa, but they were covered big time. They trade up to get the center out of Wisconsin, Tyler Badeas, the Remington Award winner, feels a huge need now that Travis Frederick left. And then in a fifth round, they just took Bradley Nye, who's just sitting there falling down draft boards, the defensive end out of Utah. And you talk about players in the Pac-12. He won the Morris Trophy, which is given to players who they think is the best player they play against. And you ask a lot of the Pac-12 offensive linemen, who's the toughest guy you played? They'll mention his name. He goes to the Senior Bowl, gets three sacks. He should not be as good as a football player as he is, considering his traits, but he is. This draft doesn't get an A+. It came awful close. We only gave one A+, but they got a lot of A+ from other places, and we give this draft an A for sure. The Washington Redskins, with the number 2 overall pick, take Chase Young. Not a need necessarily to have Montez Sweat, have older Ryan Kerrigan who could play defensive end presumably. But this is just a great pick. They just took best player available, and the guy is explosive, big, and productive. He got 16 sacks, and he didn't have any in his last 2 games. And that is an enormous amount. I mean, in college, I don't care about the last 2 games. I know, but do you know how much 16 sacks is?
16.
It's okay. It's probably around 16. But that is an enormous amount of production. I believe led the country. And then you look what they did later on. Antonio Gibson, they listed him as a receiver when he was first drafted. The production crew did from ESPN. I'm thinking he's going to be a running back because when you watch Memphis games, his production was not as high in terms of stats because they had an arsenal of different weapons, Patrick Taylor and guys that would rotate through. They had a lot of skill positions at Memphis that could play, believe it or not. But he could catch and run, and I think he might be like a big pass catching running back. He's 6 foot, 228. He's got great hands. And then 4th round, Antonio Golden. What's his name?
Antonio Gandy Golden.
Antonio Gandy Golden. I know that from Liberty. Again, a huge receiver, 6'4", 230, but it was productive at Liberty and 1,000-yard campaign after 1,000-yard every year, had 1,000 yards receiving or more. And in the 7th round, James Smith-Williams, a guy people don't know much about. He was at NC State. And the guy has really a good skill set. He's just been injured all the time. And the guy's probably a 2nd-round value who they got in the 7th round, worth it. I like the draft overall. It was a little thin on picks. I didn't like some of the other ones, but I give this draft a solid B. New York Giants, picking 4th overall, took Andrew Thomas, offensive tackle out of Georgia. I like the player. I don't like where he was taken. You have the 4th overall pick in the draft. This is rare territory. You're supposed to get a premium player. And now, here's the issue. If you wanted this position, if you're the Giants GM, Dave Gettleman, you could have traded down and still got one of 4 equitable offensive tackles because he's not worth the pick here. He's a top 12 player. He's not a top 4 player. I would have taken Isaiah Simmons. I would have just taken the best player if he had to sit here. But either the Giants couldn't get a trade, which I doubt, or they didn't want to trade because Gettleman, I believe, has not traded down for any of his last 7 drafts at any point. Has never traded down any pick. So, like 54 picks, that makes no sense. You have to be able to do that as a GM. And so I like Thomas, but you want to get an all-pro here. I'm not sure he has all-pro potential. Isaiah Simmons had all-pro potential. Should have taken Isaiah Simmons. Now, in the 2nd round, Xavier McKinney, a good pick for where they took him. In the 3rd round, a prospect I really like, offensive tackle Matt Pert out of UConn. Athletic kid, has a lot of good traits. Again, what I favor, prototypes. Size, speed, length, ability to move. Does well in testing drills. And a good football player. After that, they threw a lot of picks at the back 7, a ton of picks in day 3, all at linebacker and secondary. I didn't care for the draft because they didn't do as much as they could have with what they had. Overall, I give this one a C+. The NFC South, we're going to start with the Atlanta Falcons. This is where John and I live in the Atlanta area. We're not fans of the team, but we follow them pretty well. We have no choice. In the 1st round, they were going to take a corner. It was well known. Peter King wrote about it, that they're trying to trade up for one of the 2 corners. And when they didn't get it, they just reached. They just took A.J. Terrell out of Clemson. And I don't think he's even the best corner available, but they were bound and determined to take a corner. And this is the problem with the Falcons. They don't draft well enough to fill their needs, but they draft average players at premium spots. This is not a bad player. I like Terrell. I think he's a good player. But this is A slot. The 1st round pick is an A slot, and you're taking a B player. Same thing when they took Jake Matthews. I know what you're saying. They took Julio Jones at the 4th overall pick. Well, yeah, well, anybody could take in Julio Jones. A 6'4" receiver who runs a 4.39. Who doesn't know that guy can play?
Is he going to be good?
Wait, is he all right? But this is, we're to take Matt Ryan. I don't think Matt Ryan was worth a top 3 pick, wherever he was picked. So then they have to pay these guys. Same with A.J. Terrell. They drafted Desmond Trufant in the 1st round at corner. He was fine, but he's already off the team, and now they have to replace him with A.J. Terrell. Having said that, I love the Marlon Davidson pick in the 2nd round. I thought he was worth the value at Auburn. He moved all over to the defensive line. He's a tone setter. In the 3rd round, reach. Matt Hennessy, center out of Temple. He may play guard, but I have a feeling that Alex Mack won't be on this team as of next year. Might even be a trade target. So Michael Walker, linebacker out of Fresno State. We saw him play some. John's kind of a Fresno State fan for some reason. Undersized linebacker. Reaches all throughout. The Falcons don't help themselves enough. This is their biggest issue, is that they draft okay. They don't draft badly. They draft okay, and it's just enough to keep the GM in place and the coach in place. We give this one a C+. The Carolina Panthers, Matt Rule takes over as head coach formerly of Baylor, and presumably from what the accounts have been written, they're going to shift to a 4-3 defense, and they get their cornerstone, their tone setter. Rule's talked about that, wanted to build a culture, wanted to lay a foundation, and you cannot ask for a better tone setter, a guy that fills a position than Derek Brown. We talked about him since the beginning of the year when Auburn was playing. We love that whole Auburn defensive line. This guy is just great. 326 pounds in hustles. Excellent on the field, excellent off the field. A leader, rallies the team. Perfect pick. Need meets value, and a very safe pick, I think. Then they take Yetur Gross-Matos, defensive end out of Penn State. Length and production, has some size. You can tell they're trying to be a bigger team. They take also Jeremy Chin, second round out of, I believe, Southern Illinois. Big safety, 6'3", 220. And people noticed that this entire draft was defense. There was no offensive players. Well, not only that, there's not even any linebackers. It was all the secondary. It was all the defensive line. They got Troy Pride, a corner out of Notre Dame with speed in the 4th round, and a pick I love, Bravian Roy, a 6th round nose tackle out of Baylor. Matt Rule recruited this kid. Matt Rule coached this kid. Matt Rule knows this kid. This guy's bigger than Derek Brown. This guy's like 340 pounds. You're going to put him next to Derek Brown in the middle. This team had trouble stopping the run. Panthers fans will tell you that. This was an issue for them. And if these guys develop, good luck running on this team now. They've got some huge size up front. I like what Matt Rule is doing here. I think this is a good draft, and I give it a solid A minus. Tampa Bay is clearly in win now mode. I projected them in a mock draft to take an offensive tackle, and they did. Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa in the 1st round. Antoine Winfield, who really was a late riser. He was a 2nd round pick out of Minnesota, defensive back. His dad was out of Ohio State, a long-time NFL defensive back. But if you look at Winfield, his production, very impressive this year. It was all 1 year. The year before that, he really didn't do much. But he's got kind of a skill set where he might be able to come in and help you right away. And Tampa wanted a pass-catching running back and got Keyshawn Vaughn out of Vanderbilt, who might be pretty good in that role. They also got a good receiver out of Minnesota named Tyler Johnson. This is on top of a loaded receiving core. Now, I kind of like this draft, and then you figure in the 4th round pick, the 4th round pick is Rob Gronkowski. And then you're talking about a pretty good draft class. We give this one an A minus. The New Orleans Saints in the 1st round take Cesar Ruiz, Michigan. Now, Ruiz was unusual because he was a high school center. Most offensive linemen who are 5-stars in high school started left tackle and they moved to center in college. He was always a center, feels like he was born to play center. And that's all he played in Michigan, except for he had a cup of coffee at guard. But he moved to center as a starting as a sophomore. 3-year starter there. Well, the Saints drafted Eric McCoy with their 1st pick last year at center. So Ruiz is going to see some time at guard, looks like. He can do it. He did it before at Michigan. And it looks like you always have that fallback in case something happens to your center. Not a bad pick. Zach Bond, undersized pass rusher out of Wisconsin in the 2nd round. And then the Saints traded most of their draft, the rest of their draft, to get Adam Troutman out of Dayton. Troutman is size, speed prospect. Not a huge player, but really athletic for size. Showed up great at the Senior Bowl. And then they're out of draft picks. That's it. They just had 3 draft picks. And they were on the phone with Tommy Stevens, the Mississippi State quarterback. And they're trying to get him as an undrafted free agent. He says, I've got like 5 or 6 other offers. So they traded away 6th rounder next year to get in a 7th round to take Stevens, a project out of Mississippi State. Not a lot of draft picks. I thought they could have done a little better. You have a very limited sample size with only 4 players of how you can judge them. And I think Ruiz, really his best position is center. I think he'd be a good NFL guard, but we don't know. I give the Saints a B minus. Seattle Seahawks. I don't particularly care for this draft. In the 1st round pick, they take Jordan Brooks, linebacker out of Texas Tech, who we talked about and we like. I like him more as maybe like an early 3rd rounder. He's athletic, he made a lot of plays, had a lot of tackle for loss production. In the 2nd round, they reached, I think, on Darrell Taylor, defensive end out of Tennessee. In the 3rd round, I thought they reached on Damian Lewis, the guard out of LSU. Now, you can knock me all you want because this team has a long, sustained, a decade of success. They've apparently drafted well enough, despite the fact we knocking them, that they have had a decade straight of winning seasons. Well, if you notice that what happens a lot is they're in these games and they're having trouble in a lot of their games lately. I think the talent has decreased, and Russell Wilson bails them out in the second half of games, and Pete Carroll is one of the most underrated defensive coaches of this decade. That guy is so good on defense, and it goes back to his USC days, and they're kind of putting it together with duct tape and baling wire, but you cannot keep this up. You cannot draft like this and hope to sustain excellence. At some point, it's going to catch up to you. Now, you will hear this from his Bruce Irvin pick or the LJ Collier pick. You will hear a couple of executives voice through ESPN personalities, tell them secretly, we like this guy. This was a great pick. And you hear a few people say that. Okay, Well, Napoleon had a saying, if your enemy is making a mistake, don't interfere. And of course they're saying this. Because if you have somebody in your conference, your division, who you don't think is a good drafter, you want him to keep his job. And I think that things like that are intentionally put out there by other GMs who want John Schneider to keep this job. They want him to take third-round picks in the first round and have all the talent they want keep sliding down to them. It's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but it does make sense when you think about it. Overall, I didn't care for this draft. One of the worst we think in this year, and I give it a D-. Also a team we don't think did very well. The San Francisco 49ers didn't have a lot of draft picks in this draft. Used the 13th overall pick, traded to 14 with Tampa Bay, took defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw out of South Carolina. Kinlaw is an absolute physical freak. Just abnormal proportions, abnormal talent for a defensive tackle. Man, if everything works out great, he might even be DeForest Buckner one day. So I don't know why you would trade DeForest Buckner. I have no idea, and just take somebody who you hope can one day, at his very best, if everything works out, can be DeForest Buckner. I know there's a salary cap issue. Tell me what is the most important position on the field beside quarterback?
Rushing the passer.
Rushing the passer. And the edge guys are awesome. The defensive guys on the inside are every bit as good. I think they're more important because they're rare and even more hard to find. You had a guy and he was young. He was not 33. Why would you trade him and you get somebody who you hope can be him? Makes no sense to me. I don't like that. I think if you're very lucky, if everything works out, it's a lateral move. He would be younger. Also in the first round, Arizona State receiver Brandon Ayuk. Not an extremely tall target, but very long frame, big catch radius, and a yards after the catch player. I thought a little bit early. Aside from that, they didn't really have a pick to the 5th round. Colton McKivitz, the offensive lineman out of West Virginia. I didn't care for their draft either. Really, they were kind of bereft on picks through trades and the draft where you would have loved to have been like Minnesota or Miami and had a ton of picks in this draft. And then what they did with it was not particularly impressive. We give this draft a D. The Los Angeles Rams, we're going to take into account that this first round pick was part of the Jalen Ramsey trade. That was potentially a good move for them. And in the second round, the first pick in this draft, they took Cam Akers, running back, Florida State. I like Akers. He's got productivity. He's got enough athletic ability to be a good back, a workhorse back. His production was up and down in Florida State, but a lot of that was not his fault. You have to look at this was a historically bad Florida State offensive line, and for years. And I'm talking about a bottom-tier ACC line. It makes no sense that they had these issues for year after year, but they did, and they had injuries. So he did what he could. He's a very well-regarded kid in terms of character. I think he can have a better pro career than he did a college career. In the third round, Terrell Burgess, safety out of Utah, not a bad player. Terrell Lewis, big prototype, edge rusher out of Alabama. Had some injury issues, significant injury issues, but he has first-round talent. And then in the second round, before all those, in the second round, they took Van Jefferson. Van Jefferson's a receiver out of Florida. He got a lot of pub because his dad was an NFL receivers coach. And this reminds me a little bit of Brian Robisky. Brian Robisky was a Ohio State receiver whose dad, Terry, was a longtime NFL receivers coach, well regarded. Well, here's the problem. If your dad was an NFL wide receivers coach, and who was, by the way, his dad was Sean Jefferson, also an NFL veteran, why are you not dominating college football? You have an advantage that the other players don't have to go on with your athletic ability. Why are you not catching 80 passes for 1,300 yards a year? He didn't do that. And if he do that in college, what makes you think he's going to do that in the NFL, where the athletes are bigger, better, and have better coaching? I don't like that pick in the second round. So far, all three of these teams in NFC West that we have not done well in our estimation. I give this draft a D. But this division is not entirely full of losers because I love what the Arizona Cardinals did. I think they had one of the best drafts. In the first round, they had a bunch of needs, a bunch of mock drafts, had them taking a receiver, and they did not go with need. They just took the best player. Isaiah Simmons from Clemson, the linebacker, fell to them, and they just took him. Brilliant. He can't help you. He's a 240-pound linebacker who runs under 4.4. In the second round, they didn't have a pick because they've got an all-pro receiver they got in a trade from the Houston Texans. They got Nuke Hopkins on their team. And in the third round, Josh Jones, offensive tackle from Houston, sliding down draft boards. This was a need. They took him there. In the fourth round, Lakeview Fotu. If you watch Utah football, me and John watched quite a bit of their games. Their whole defensive front was full of a bunch of nasty players. Fotu fit in, and just a huge run-stopping defensive tackle, put him in the middle of the defense. And one of our favorite players in college, Evan Weaver, in a 6th round out of Cal. I don't know if this dude can play in the NFL, man, but I mean, he looks like Barney Rubble out there. But he also has some things that just remind me of Zach Thomas. He's very unlikely to even make this team, possibly in a 6th round. But then Eno Benjamin, another Pac-12 guy, undersized, productive back out of Arizona State. Love this draft. Love it. And, I mean, this team won big time. Cliff Kingsbury's a winner. Look at his house. You saw that in draft coverage, the mansion he lives in. Holy cow, right? But everybody else in their division, the way we saw it, had terrible drafts. This is an ascending team. They've got a 2nd-year quarterback now. We give them an A in this draft, and we think they did great. Let's talk about the NFC Central. We had one of our reader requests, wanted to talk about the Lions. We'll talk about every team. Let's go a little in depth on them. With the 1st round, Jeffrey Okudah, 3rd overall, fills a need because of Darius Slay. And a lot of the Patriots assistants learn this. Back before the front. It's kind of a little bit different than normal NFL thinking, but they want corners and safeties that will help the defensive front, and Okudah was the best corner in this draft, man. And we were watching him, and he was just shutting down great players left and right. Awesome job against Clemson. Awesome job against Michigan, who had some good receivers. And length, size, only a 1-year starter, but Ohio State is a cornerback factory. And this guy is a very sure pick. You do a lot on your defense, and you almost erase one player, one skill position player from the opposing team. It would have been better if they kept Darius Slay, though. I don't know why they didn't do that. And in the 2nd round, they take DeAndre Swift, running back, Georgia. Now, they want to be a power run team. You can just tell the way Bob Quinn is building this team. He's always trying to get big offensive linemen, and they just want to run the ball down your throat. Now, you don't have to get a bunch of receivers to help your quarterback. Okay, people think that if you get receivers to help your quarterback, it does. Sure. But that's not the only way. Like, if you get other players on your team, it can't help your quarterback. You know what helps your quarterback? A 1,500-yard rusher. Because he didn't have to throw for 4,000 yards a year to try to win the game for you. Because his passing lanes are wide open because of play action. Because the defense can't sell out and just come after him every play with the blitz because you have no authority running the ball. So DeAndre Swift, really kind of an average-sized player. But he's explosive, played against good competition, and he's got a good NFL skill set. He can catch the ball and do something after the catch. After that, I didn't care for it as much. Julian Okora, I thought was a bit of a reach. But you can see what the Lions are trying to do. This team was in a lot of close games last year. They are much better than record indicates. And they had injuries at running back. If Swift can come in there and give them a wrong threat, along with Kerryon Johnson, they have a 1-2 punch. I think they could be a lot better team this year. They could really have a chance of competing for the playoffs. Overall, the top of the draft, I liked, especially Okudah, a stud pick. I tapered off after that, in my opinion. We give them a B-. The Packers take Jordan Love, Utah State quarterback, in the 1st round. Allegedly as competition for Aaron Rodgers. He's not, at least not for a couple of years. Now, there's talk, of course, that the coach, Matt LaFleur, in 1 year is already tired of Aaron Rodgers' act. And who can blame him? Because Mike McCarthy got sick of his act. You could see that this guy is a locker room lawyer. This guy's a diva. It's really not a secret around the league. And now, what the Packers are doing is they're transitioning to more of a run team. And do you want to take pressure off the quarterback by doing that? What we just talked about with the Lions. You're also doing that when maybe you want to replace your quarterback at some point, and you don't have to rely on him, playing hero ball, making all the plays for you. So to take A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round, a 247-pound bruiser that does have some breakaway traits. And I remember reading some of the scouting reports that are almost laughable, like Tua Tagovailoa can't make tight window throws. Like, I've never seen Tua Tagovailoa make a tight window throw. It's just guys are so open sometimes, he didn't have to, but he makes plenty. And one of them I read was A.J. Dillon does not break tackles. How many Boston College games we see? A.J. Dillon is killing people out there. The guy is a bulldozer. He was maybe the best running back in that conference, one of the best in the country. So I love that pick. I did think it was a little high. In the 3rd round, I take Josh DeGora, who is really kind of a fullback out of Cincinnati. As this draft went down, tapered down, that I didn't like a lot of these picks. I didn't like the DeGora pick. That was a complete wasted pick. You can get that guy in the 6th round. But you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to take the focus, the ball out of Rodgers' hands, or prepare for for that happening eventually when he retires, and be a team that's able to run the ball. I like the Love pick. I think it's a good pick because you can't worry about Aaron Rodgers. You have to worry about the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers is not going to be a Packer 10 years from now. He might not be a Packer 3 years from now. And you have to have a contingency plan. You can't go like some teams. Remember how many quarterbacks Cleveland had or Detroit before they got their guy? And who knows that their guy is any good right now? Matthew Stafford is fine. Baker Mayfield, still a question, but at least it's potentially an answer. Well, Jordan Love is not a project quarterback in terms of NFL traits. The guy can make NFL plays. The guy can make explosive NFL plays. He just makes some bad decisions sometimes. If that pick hits, that really depends on this grade. So you have to judge that when you grade it. Their potential, I like them where they picked them. That alone, it keeps you from giving them a bad draft. I give them a B. The Chicago Bears did not have a lot of draft arsenal in this draft. Part of it was the Khalil Mack trade. That's worth it, all right? In the second round, they take Cole Kmet. When after that pick was announced, they had 11 tight ends on their roster, so some of those guys were going to go. Kmet was fine at that point. I didn't love the pick necessarily. In the second round, Jalen Johnson, also in the second round, big corner to Utah. I didn't like him where they was picked that much either. I don't think the Bears helped themselves. They didn't have a lot of draft picks to work with. They got a couple of seventh-round projects on the offensive line, but they didn't maximize what they had. You could still have gotten better players in this draft. I don't know what the Bears are doing, really. I think they miss Vic Fangio. I think that their quarterback situation is kind of a mess. They didn't draft anybody to give him competition. They brought Nick Foles in, of course. But this was a tepid draft by them. One of the worst drafts, I thought. They had very few resources and did not use them well. Conversely, the Vikings, on the other hand, we're going to get to them next. They did a lot with a lot of picks. And we give the Bears a D. And now we come to the Vikings. Now, what I said before about the 49ers trading DeForest Buckner, the Vikings had a similar situation. They trade Stephon Diggs, the receiver, away to the Bills for a first-round pick. And they pick up LSU receiver Justin Jefferson. I don't think it's the same thing. Like, all they did was replace one player with another because Stephon Diggs is a good receiver. He's not one of the two best players in the NFL at his position. So this was a good replacement pick, who was younger, and not a locker room lawyer, which Stephon Diggs was known to be. So you got him off your team. Justin Jefferson is upside. John loved him in particular. He's one of your favorites, wasn't he? Yeah. And also in the first round, they take Jeff Gladney, corner out of TCU. Undersized guy, can fly. Kind of reminds me of Jason Verrey. Mike Zimmer loves him some corners. That's one of his favorite positions. He always spends a lot of draft capital on it. And the third round, got Cam Dantzler out of Mississippi State. Dantzler is really like a prototype SEC corner. Big, good value for where they took him there. Now, they had to trade with the Saints. The Vikings did. And they kept trading down throughout this draft and eventually even traded a fourth-round pick next year for fifth this year and a fifth-round pick next year for sixth this year and still had 15 picks. They had 15 picks in this draft. I love a lot of these players they got. Ezra Cleveland, the Boise State offensive tackle, fills a need, good value for what he got him. And then you start looking at what they did with those picks in the later half of the draft. James Lynch out of Baylor. Dude should not be a good player. Dude has T-Rex arms. But the guy gets a lot of tackles for loss, which is a thing that you look for in the interior, but the guy got a lot of sacks on the interior as well. 13.5 college production, something to look at. They took a safety, Josh Patelis out of Michigan. Not as impressed with him, but he had a former teammate named Brian Cole. Brian Cole was kind of a 6'2", 215-pound athlete, transferred out of Michigan, went to Mississippi State. They got him late. I don't know why he was not more highly regarded. Every time we watched Mississippi State game, we saw them live one time this year. That dude just played. I remember him from Michigan, and I thought he was a good player. And this was kind of the theme throughout the draft. They kept got good value almost all the way across it. I love what the Vikings did. They did so many. Kenny Willekes, Big Ten defensive end in the 7th round. So many guys they got were good value for where they picked, and we give them an A in this draft. They had 15 picks, used them well, and still got picks for next year.
Hey, it's John, rocking the quarantine haircut. Hope everyone's safe out there, staying inside and being protected. Hope you're healthy. If not, get better soon, and we hope that we can return to normal. We're going to be uploading every Sunday, hopefully, getting back on schedule, being consistent. If you like this video and what we have to say, don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more from us, and click the notification bell so you can be notified every time we have another video. If there's a topic you want us to cover, you can comment it down below, and we're a really small channel, so we'll probably get to it. Whether it's coach, player, any topic you have, we'll probably talk about it. Some other ways you can come into contact with us, look at the description box. We have a Gmail, a Facebook, a Twitter, and there's a bunch of ways that you can come into more contact with OurSport. And as always, thank you for watching.
Thanks, everyone. Willie Davis, Hall of Fame Packers great, died this week. Honor him. See y'all next week.